The controversy about Justice D.Y. Chandrachud's prayer just before formulating the Ayodhya verdict, which resulted in the building of the Ram temple in Ayodhya. On which side of the controversy are you? I am on the side of Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. And let me tell you why. I know I'm not on the side of the more fashionable, more articulate, vocal and voluble party of the two sides of the debate. However, I have something to say. And if you would show me the courtesy and the patience, you will understand the reasons why I choose to take the present stand. Justice Chandrachud has revealed that just before the Ayodhya verdict was formulated, he prayed to God for divine guidance and inspiration in handling this rather ticklish, extremely important, and perhaps volatile incendiary issue with consequences that could perhaps at that point in time be somewhat uncertain, though I personally did not see any uncertainty in this because the Muslim side had firmly committed itself to accepting the verdict of the court no matter what it turned out to be. Because frankly speaking, the Muslim side of the dispute was just looking for an exit route, a face-saving device. They on their own did not want to disown the Babri Masjid issue, but they were quite happy to be rid of the issue if the Supreme Court of India gave a verdict in favor of the other party. That was where it stood. Whether or not the same will be acknowledged now, I don't know, but as a person who was somewhat monitoring the Babri Masjid issue from 1992 onwards, I'm pretty sure that this was the case. Now, what did the Chief Justice of India, Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud, say? He merely said that he exercised his freedom guaranteed under Article 25 of the Indian Constitution, which empowers every citizen of India, every person in India, the freedom to practice, preach, and propagate his faith. So the Chief Justice of India says that he practiced his faith. And his faith encouraged him to seek divine guidance in doing something which he recognized to be of historic significance. To that extent, surely this is infallible. It is beyond blame. There could be a little bit of sensitivity about whether or not a person who holds a constitutional position, a very high constitutional position, like the Chief Justice of India, in carrying out what is not a private undertaking but an official judicial task, should have prayed to God to derive divine guidance, or on the other hand, stuck very clearly, unwaveringly to the discipline of litigation, the juridical discipline of examining evidence dispassionately without any extraneous consideration being allowed to influence either the attitude that prevailed through the process of litigation or the formulation of the final outcome is a slightly different issue. However, what I have never been able to understand is this, and I would be very happy to know your opinion on this matter. Can we really assume that an individual can be other than himself in carrying out his public responsibilities. When we say that religion must be privatized, and in theory I have to agree with it because that's a secular mandate, it is all right to banish ostensibly authentic religious functions, religious advocacies, religious loyalties, religious biases from public life. There is no question about it. And all the more so in the case of someone who holds a position like the position that Dr. Chandrachud does at the moment. But the question that puzzles me is this. The Chandrachud who prays at home and is an ardent practitioner of a particular religion is the same person who goes and sits in the chair of the Chief Justice of India, and I find it very hard to believe that the religious fervor, the bhakti, the devotion, and the personal inclination towards a particular faith tradition, which that individual happens to take so very seriously in such a state of spiritual devotion, will not and should not be expected to influence him in handling the judicial process. This is something that I find very hard to believe. This is a kind of assumption that just goes on and on without anybody subjecting it to any kind of rational scrutiny. I am personally of the very strong opinion, having given due thought to this particular issue, that you can't expect a person to be a split personality. One personality while he is at home, praying to his God in his puja room at home, and completely different person when he comes to his workplace, handling his official matters, and even if those official matters are matters juridical, where total objectivity, clinical impartiality is the bottom line. I don't believe that this is possible at all. So, is not the present Chief Justice of India trying to be a little more truthful, honest, psychologically consistent in public life? Is he not alerting to the fact that this kind of existence in two completely contrary spheres is simply not possible as far as individuals are concerned, and such expectations are therefore highly misplaced? I don't know, he has not clarified this, I am simply speculating. So, if Justice Chandrachud is trying to be more forthright, more honest, more upfront in this particular issue than anyone else before him had cared to be, then I'm fully with him. And particularly at a time, and the difference between Justice Chandrachud and any of his predecessors is, or a vast number of his predecessors is, particularly the predecessors who held office before 2014, the significant difference between them and Justice Chandrachud is that Justice Chandrachud has been functioning, is still functioning in a vastly changed Indian national context, where Hindu Rashtra is an undeclared reality. And who does not know that a human being is very substantially influenced by the total ambience, the matrix within which he exists, thinks and functions. Even if his predecessors before 2014 had felt exactly the same way Dr. Chandrachud is feeling now, that they were the same persons at home and in the workplace, which is eminently understandable. They did not have the courage to say so in public. because it was inopportune to do so, because it was assumed that India was secular. To what extent India was really secular is a matter of your opinion and mine. I'll go by what you say on the matter. But to the extent that at least in theory it was assumed that India was secular, they did not find it appropriate or opportune to mention or to say what Justice Chandrachud has now said. So this is the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is this, that all of us know that whenever people want to disown responsibility, particularly responsibility for doing or having done something which cannot otherwise be defended, they always fall back on the God option. I call it the God option. God option is the default option for many people. Now, if somebody wastes his time and performs poorly in an exam, in all likelihood that person would say, God, why have you done this to me? Somebody drinks himself to death, invites liver cirrhosis upon himself, even against good counsel. And when he is in sick bed, he would say, Lord, why have you done this to me? Even a thief, just before he goes out on his theft expedition, would earnestly pray to God for protection, because his business of burglary or theft or whatever is a risky business. And therefore, perhaps more sincerely than most others, he would pray to God and seek God's protection. That's human nature. And also, the thief has a wife and children. It's to support them, to feed his children, that he's going out on this nightly work. And in the process of doing his nightly work, he falls down from the first floor, breaks his leg or something. And his wife would blame God and say, God, why have you done this to us? So, God is a kind of convenient dumping ground of the responsibilities of various people who act according to their likes and dislikes, whims and fancies, but want to disown the responsibility for doing whatever they are doing or whatever they have done, and then they will put it to the doorstep of God. Poor God. And because God is God, and he cannot choose but to be God, he has to tamely, silently, meekly accept all these imputations, all these ascriptions. So most people invoke God just before doing what they suspect is not particularly defensible or altogether fair, just to be able to shift the burden of responsibility onto God. If you take 1,000 people who pray to God before doing whatever they have in mind to do, I'm sure at least 995 of them would be praying to God only in this manner, and not to really understand what it is that God wants them to do or refrain from doing in order to abide by the will of God as revealed through the prayer. No one prays to God to seek the will of God. Everyone prays to God just to impose one's will on God. It is to tame God and bring God down to one's own chosen inclination, one's own line of preference, that people pray. And I've said a lot about such abuses of prayer in several videos shared with all of you in the past. And I therefore will not repeat whatever I've said in the past. So that's the second point I want to make. Now let me go to the third point. See, there is a verse in the Bible that God's ways are mysterious. God's ways are mysterious. Therefore, invoking God is a very convenient thing, because then you can bring a little bit of mystery into whatever you're doing. The advantage in conjuring up a ambience of mystery is that it then liberates you to act in strict adherence to the principles of reason and common sense. Is God bound by the requirements of reason and common sense? Does God have to act logically, consistently? Is it not God's privilege, prerogative to act whimsically or act in ways that seem strange to human beings? Can God be compelled to act according to the common sense that we all entertain? If God can be, then God is not God. So by definition, God acts beyond and outside of the framework of human rationality. This is how it is understood. I'm not saying that philosophically that is the case. I'm going by the assumptions prevalent in popular religion. So God's ways are mysterious. Now, for example, take the Ayodhya verdict. The 5 judges bench that handled it, with the Chief Justice, the then Chief Justice presiding, every one of them came to the conclusion that the destruction of the Babri Masjid in 1992 was a criminal act. This is exactly other words, a criminal act. Now, normally you would expect that if the court, the Honorable Court, came to the conclusion that what was perpetrated in 1992 was a criminal act, the criminality, the recognized criminality of the deed would enjoin upon the Honorable Court to undo the crime. But that's not what the verdict did. The verdict, therefore, said, yes, it's a criminal deed, but let the people who perpetrated the crime build their temple here and the Muslims be shifted out. I'm not in disagreement with the outcome. I'm glad that this naughty problem, this headache has been resolved. And I'm very grateful to the judges. I'm only looking at the situation in terms of certain concepts and certain streams of thought. So, only in a context which is divinely inspired could a judge or a set of 5 judges have taken this kind of a stand after a long period of litigation, after listening to the pros and cons in elaborate detail, and then having come to a clear conviction that what was done in 1992 in the form of bringing the Babri Masjids down was a criminal deed. Then the follow-up is, well, you take the whole entire place, you build your temple here. That is an act of mystery. It certainly does not belong purely to the juridical domain, the domain of legal process. It belongs to the mysterious realm of the divine. There's no question about it. I'm willing to accept it. I've already accepted it. I've never expressed the slightest disagreement with the Ayodhya verdict. And I deliberately refrained from it. I've written in the past about various Supreme Court judgments. It's not that I'm indifferent to questions of law. But on this issue, I have not written a single word because of the various streams of thought that together choked me in this regard. So there is this element of mystery. And perhaps Dr. Chandrachud, being a scholar, one of the very well-read judges that we have had in several years, is our present Chief Justice. Therefore, he is suggesting that there is this sort of impenetrable aura of mystery about the entire juridical outcome of the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi case or litigation in the Supreme Court of India. Now I come to the final point I want to make. Justice Chandrachud is about to retire. And I'm a person who has retired. I can tell you one thing. When a person retires from very active and significant public life, something very interesting happens within him. And that is, he begins to be more philosophical, and I dare say he begins to be even more theological. And Given how well read, how sensitive, how enlightened Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud is as a person, given also the fact that his date of retirement is fast approaching, and therefore the retirement psychology is surely operative in him, I come to the following conclusion: that the statements that Justice Chandrachud has made now, after a delay of several years, just on the eve of his retirement, is meant with an is inspired by an honorable intent, an honorable purpose. And what is that honorable intent? Justice Chandrachud is now reflecting not only as a judge, but also as a spiritually sensitive person. Now, I need your patience to explain this. It's a little tricky, but it will be interesting if you bother to follow the argument to its conclusion. Now, let's look at the facts. Justice Chandrachud, a sterling legal brain, publicly states that he prayed to God for guidance before writing the judgment or before formulating the final standpoint. Now, how did God respond? To what extent could God respond? Our only way to answer this question is by looking at the judgment itself. As I said, the judgment has this mysterious element in it. It's an act of crime, but you can have the place to yourself. It is unprecedented. I don't think there is any such verdict, not only in Indian legal history, but anywhere in the world. That could be my ignorance, but I don't know. To the best of my knowledge, there isn't a similar judgment anywhere. Now, what does this mean? There was a debate, as an interesting debate. There was a debate that raged in Europe for several centuries, at least 4 or 5 centuries, if not more. And what was the debate? The debate is God who created the universe, created the world and everything therein is, omnipotent and supremely good? Because the greatest problem in theology and in philosophy is looking at the condition of the world, looking at the amount of suffering that exists in the world, looking at the perversiveness of evil in this world. How could a good God have created such a bad world? And particularly because this good God who created the bad world was also omnipotent. This debate raged on. And finally, as it is the most difficult debate to resolve. But something of a tentative resolution of the debate took place in the 18th century. Fag end of the 17th century, early 18th century. And the principal name here is Immanuel Kant. You can actually trace it to also someone who was just before him, Baruch Spinoza. And they said that the God who created the world was good, but he was powerless. You understand the point? You can't explain the conditions of the world. You can't explain the perversiveness and the power of evil in this world if you assume that God is at once omnipotent, that is most powerful, all powerful, and also supremely good. So they said, yes, God is supremely good, but God is powerless. As far as the world is concerned, God is powerless. So when God tries to deal with the world, he accepts the conditions that are inherent in the world, which comprises mostly of matter, not entirely of matter, but mostly of matter. Matter is a medium of serious limitations. As Swami Vivekananda also said, he said, the spirit is dormant in matter. It wakes up in the animal world and it attains consciousness in the human world. So serious limitations as far as the material medium is concerned. So when God has to function within the material medium, which is the worldly scheme of things, then he is seriously limited. He is not omnipotent. He is not powerful. So perhaps Justice Chandrachud now wants to reignite this very complicated theological debate that raged for centuries in Europe, to find out, perhaps post-retirement, he will apply himself in an able and admirable manner to the resolution of this conflict for which he is eminently qualified. Whether we can combine the wicked, evil-riddled scheme of things that exist in the world with the idea or the doctrine that God created this scheme of things, this world, and God is at once powerful and at once supremely good. Is it possible to reopen this issue and arrive at a better conclusion than Baruch Spinoza and Immanuel Kant did? And John Stuart Mill, in his 3 essays on religion, makes a reference to this problem, among several others, and how Immanuel Kant resolved it, etc. So, is not Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud, in his own very subtle, clever, crafty manner, sending out a message at a time when India is sort of highly excited about Rama Raja, etc. A message to the effect that, yes, you invoke the name of God, but please understand that God is powerless. In this world, people act according to their vested interest. The general principle is that when individuals act, they act only according to their selfish interest. And the same is true also of highly organized, homogenized people groups, because a homogenized people group will act as one person. So when people are hardwired in acting only according to their vested interests, is not God utterly powerless and helpless to influence and change the outcome in such a context? So what may you expect from a theocratic state? If you create a theocratic state, would it not be the case that God will be invoked, but God will be powerless? Things will happen and things will be done within the theocratic state exactly as people want, in utter indifference to what God wants or what God stands for or what God would have preferred. It's extremely unlikely that Dr. Chandrachud's praying to God made a substantial difference or even marginal difference to the outcome of the Ayodhya verdict. I, for one, find it very difficult to believe. Therefore, this is the conclusion. I am amused that the opposition parties are making a hoo-ha about this. And they're doing so simply because they have no understanding. I feel sorry for them. They should understand the subtleties of Dr. Chandrachud as a thinker. He is not merely a religiously devout person, which he is, and I give him full credit for it as his choice, and as a citizen covered under the provisions of the Indian Constitution, he has every right to be devout in the practice of his religion. But he is also a thinking soul, and therefore he is spiritually sensitive to the various conundrums in this particular sphere. And one such conundrum is that God is supremely powerful, God is supremely good, And it is the supremely good God who is supremely powerful, who has created the supremely evil world. How do you actually resolve this problem? And I wish Dr. Chandrachud all the best as he retires, so that he can apply himself wholeheartedly to resolving this very naughty issue, which many, many intellectual, theological, philosophical giants before him in the past failed to. And if he resolves this issue, I'm sure he would have done a tremendous service to India, not merely to India, but humanity at large. So that's what I have to say on this matter. I say it again, I'm not upset that Justice Chandrachud prayed before the verdict was formulated. And I don't think his prayer made the slightest difference, either to the long period of litigation or to the final outcome. Even then he prayed, then he needs to really reveal his idea of prayer, the purpose of prayer in his understanding, and how he experienced the power of prayer in proceeding to do the work that he was to do, for which he invoked the guidance of God. It will be extremely interesting, fascinating to know the truth of this. I only hope and pray that Justice D.Y. Chandrachud would be a little more forthcoming with respect to the issues that I've raised in this video. And if he cares to, I sincerely hope he does, then it will be a matter of a tremendous enlightenment for every citizen of India. Thank you. All the very best. Jai Hind.